What's up everyone, welcome back to this week's episode. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to install Dakota Digital's VHX system as well as GlowShift's A-pillar gauge system here in my come and swapped Chevy Suburban. So as you guys can see, I do already have the Dakota Digital VHX unit installed here in my Squarebody truck. I don't have the A-pillar gauges from GlowShift installed yet. That's going to be boost, EGTs, and then I got another one that's a pressure gauge for my auxiliary air tank as well. My first step here is going to be to remove this dash pad. I figured in order to get the A-pillar gauges in, I might as well remove the Dakota halfway as well. It's going to make some of that wiring easier to access, and figured why not share with you guys a little bit of my knowledge on how to wire one of these guys in if anyone was interested in doing their own setup. So a quick little thing I wanted to mention for removing this initial face panel here in front of your gauges. You can see under here in your dash pad there's 3 or 4 screws. If you remove those screws, it will make this pad easier to lift up. And then this guy just pops right out. I know this is mounted in front of that pad regardless, but if you don't do that, it's seeming like all of your heater hoses and everything in the back will get caught there. It makes it pretty tricky, especially down here at your headlight switch. You want to be careful removing that. The only other thing I found is right here. There's little black tabs where this other bezel comes underneath. You want to make sure that you're very careful when removing that as well, and that everything clears. This rubber lip right here clears, because once you break the tabs off this bezel and everything hangs crooked. Whoever removed this in the past has already broken the tab off of this, so mine's just going to hang a little crooked regardless. Okay, so with that panel removed, our next step is going to be to remove this dash pad. If for some reason you don't have those 3 or 4 screws removed along the bottom here, you'll want to do that. The next step, we just kind of pry up at a diagonal angle and then we pull out, because this thing actually has, you'll see mine's very cracked, but along the bottom here, it's got metal tabs that go in at a 45-degree angle, and they actually kind of snap in to the metal dash below that. So we want to try to mimic that motion on our way out. We go up and out with it, and it should pop right out. So here's a view of those metal tabs. You can see they're all along the bottom of this guy. I might be missing a few. There's another one. Anyways, if you remove the glove box, it makes this much easier to remove as well. There's like a 12-inch piece of flexi hose down there for your heater vent. Take that guy out, and then be mindful that this needs to be maneuvered around this vent hole as well. That'll make this dash pad much easier to remove. All right, so now for the fun part, the wiring. But don't worry, I have some tips and tricks that are going to hopefully make this much easier. So you've ripped into your dash, you're getting ready to put your gauges in. The next thing to do here is to figure out what this giant white 18-prong connector is, what wires go to where, and what not. So there's 2 ways you can do it. You can either follow these on the circuit board all the way around to what gauges you want, or you can use this diagram here on the screen that I've got. I've done a couple of these gauge clusters in different trucks, and wiring colors never seem to change. They just sometimes change locations. So you just kind of have to be mindful and pay attention. You can go to the back of your gauge cluster, and this circuit board will be there, and you can follow this circuit up to different grounds and different power, and then just reference that to the front of the gauge cluster and go from there. Now, the one thing that this does not do is your speedometer. So all of your electronic speedo connections, like if you're going to be throwing this in a early 90s truck and the transfer case has got a vehicle speed sensor, that is very simple. You just run 1 wire straight to the Dakota box, and I'll show you how to do that. Where it gets a little bit tricky is if you're going to be doing electronic speed on your gauges, like if you have like a 91 Squarebody or something where it has the electronic output to your gauges, and you did a swap, and now you're trying to go electronic to mechanical. They do sell an adapter for that on Dakota Digital. The other most tricky option is going to be if you're doing a mechanical output speedometer to electronic. Now they do make an adapter for that from Dakota as well that uses a GPS signal. And honestly, that's probably the easiest route I found. They are about 300 bucks, but they're very accurate and saves so much time trying to figure everything out. All of your mechanical speedometer trucks, so early 70s through mid 80s, you're going to have to use a GPS speedometer, and I'll show you how to wire that in here in just a second. In most scenarios with these square body trucks, if you're swapping in like an LS, or going to be using it with the factory big block or factory 350, something like that, you can get away with just using the Dakota box that they give you. I'm going to show you that here in a moment. However, if you're swapping in a diesel motor, something that uses a W terminal off of the alternator to read tachometer signal, or you want to use that GPS speedometer because maybe you did a swap and your speedometer is not going to wire straight into the Dakota box, I will show you the solution for that right now. So forgive my wiring craziness. I'm getting everything tied up right at the moment. This right here is going to be your Dakota box. You can see it's got all these different inputs, and it's fairly self-explanatory. Dakota gives you oil pressure sender wires. They give you water temp. They give you tachometer outputs. Everything here, like I mentioned, if you're using a gas motor where you're pulling that alternator tach signal from maybe like the distributor, or maybe your alternator has a W terminal, but this is for gas only. Diesel applications require a different box in order to read your tach signal. The other reason for getting this other box I'm about to show you is if you have a GPS speedometer, maybe your setup is going to require that in order to read your speed. Most diesel motors put out a different signal for tach that this box cannot read. So in order to convert it, you have to use this box. It's the SGI 100BT. As you can see, it's got speedo outputs as well for your GPS speedometer. And then your diesel tach is going to wire into that diesel negative terminal and input and output. This is Bluetooth compatible as well. So if you want to do, fine-tuning adjustment on your tach or fine-tuning adjustment on your speedometer, this makes it very easy. You just scan that QR code, get everything connected, you're good to go. So you got all your Dakota sensors plugged in, you got the box wired in, you got power to the box, you spent like a whole day putting this thing in, you turn the key to the truck, nothing happens with the gauges. Maybe the volt gauge works, that's about it. Let me show you what you have to do in order to set these guys up properly. It all comes down to this little guy right here that they give you with your gauges. That is your selector in order to go through the setup menu on your Dakota gauges. Essentially what you would do is hold this guy down to the right like that while you're turning the key with auxiliary power. And what that's going to do is take you into your setup menu on the gauges and allow you to calibrate things. This guy works with fuel gauges as well. So maybe you have a really old truck that's got a 30 ohm output on the fuel gauge. You can set that. This one's 90 ohms, so you have to set it to 90 ohms in order to get the fuel gauge to work. The oil pressure you got to set based off of what motor you have to go into each gauge's specific setup and run through that little setup menu, tell it what motor you have for the tach and whatnot, how many cylinders are you running in order for everything to work properly. And after you do that, everything should wake up. You can get all the basic things set up like the time of day and stuff like that, and everything should be working properly after that point. These are the instructions that they provide with the Dakota as well. It's a whole loaded like 25 pages of instructions. I recommend reading through them as well. They can be a little bit tricky to understand, but it does help you troubleshoot any problems that you may be having with getting this guy running. As you can see, this is the factory Dakota speedometer cable that they provided. I didn't end up needing it. Actually ended up having to make my own. And then they do give you a whole bunch of different adapters for your oil pressure, water temp, for whatever setup you have. It even adapted right to my 12 valve Cummins that I have in this guy. So yeah, they really do provide a whole heck of a lot. I did even notice in this new box right here, with their new gauges, they're actually providing an adapter to go from your mechanical speedo to your electronic, which would be this wire. With my last truck, I had that problem, and that adapter module was like an added 50 bucks that I had to spend to get the speedometer to work. So I think that is pretty cool. They're giving you that now. It's now time to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of this job today. Some more wiring as well. We're gonna get the boost gauge wired in, the EGT gauge wired in, and then I did just get this A-pillar panel painted up. It's gonna hold my 3 gauges. I'll put the paint I used in right here as well. I'm gonna begin removing this factory A-pillar panel, and we'll get this next one installed. All right, we're here inside the engine bay. I'm gonna get this brass 3/8 fitting that I have in my exhaust manifold right at the moment. I'm gonna get that removed, and I'm gonna get this glow shift EGT sensor installed. Stay tuned. All right, I got the pyro all wired in up here above on the firewall. I'm now going to tap for the boost gauge. I think I can remove this 1/2 inch plug fitting right here below my intake tube, and that should give me access to boost pressure there. And then we'll just run a line straight through the firewall and up to our gauges. Just figured I would come out here and show you guys how cool these gauges look at night. Feel like you get a really good view of them. Everything seems to be matching. I've got some LED headlights as well, pretty bright. But yeah, totally stoked. To close this video out, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in again for another week of building trucks with us. It seems like we're getting really close to the end of this build, and I can't wait to start taking it on a bunch of adventures, especially in the coming months, spring and summer. Hopefully by the end of the winter, we will be all dialed in and pretty much completely ready to go. As always, if you guys like what you see, please feel free to throw me a subscribe. It's free to the channel, helps me out a whole bunch, and like this video if you enjoyed. Anyways, guys, we will see you next week. Talk to you then.